Hello and welcome back to the Villa Filler podcast. I'm here with my good friend Dan Wiseman. I was going to say as always, but Dan, I've had 2 weeks off and you have gracefully taken the reins of the Villa Filler, for which I am eternally grateful of. But I am here, as always, I'm going to say it, with my good friend Dan Wiseman. Dan, it's transfer rumour season. You already know things have been heating up. I mean, some of the names that we just spoke about off camera, mate, that dropped while I was gone. We've had Vlahovic, we've had Ceballos, we've had Asensio. Dan's kept you up to date with as many of them as possible. And we're here because there's been a couple more interesting developments. And interesting is the word I'm going to use because I can't really say that I'm particularly excited about either of these players, but something that I've maintained since Unai Emery has taken over Aston Villa. If whoever he wants, he gets. And what Dan and I and what you guys care about these players, it really accounts for nothing, doesn't it, Dan? So we're taking it down a bit from the last transfer rumours because, I mean, even Lo Celso, that's an exciting one, right? Knowing what Emery has done with him and stuff like that. We're taking it down a bit because today we're talking about Manuel Lanzini and Harvey Barnes. How are you doing, mate? How are you doing? Before we get into that.
I'm good, mate. I'm good. I'm so glad that you're back, mate. Glad that you had a great time. Appreciate everyone that listened as well whilst I was riding solo, because it just feels like, when you're in the moment, I feel like there's two things that you get with recording solo, and it's interesting to see if you feel the same thing. Is that one, intros are really hard because you can do the intro, throw it to me, and then we can get straight into things. But I find I get to this point where I've got to be like, anyway,
and there's only so many times you could say, Dan's not here, it's just me.
Yes, I know. So it's like, that's tricky. And then I have the thing of like, I get to the edit afterwards and I'm like, oh my God, I was talking by myself for like 16, 17 minutes. How is anyone listening to this? But people did, and I'm very grateful. But no, mate, this show is at its best. We're at full compliment, obviously. So I'm very good, mate. And I think it's interesting, that we've come back. And I don't want to say that like these sort of rumours bring us back down to earth or anything like that, because they're two very talented players, obviously, in their own right. And I think it's probably a product of our own success, really, that we feel like this, isn't it? Because I think if you had offered us these players maybe 12 months ago, particularly with Lanzini maybe being on a free, we probably would have had a very different outlook on these kind of deals. But I think knowing where we are in the league right now, and especially, as you say, coming up all of those rumours, your Vlahovic's, your Ceballos, your Lo Celso's, all of these guys, Manuel Lanzini as well is another one that's sort of rumbling on in the background from Sporting Lisbon. I sort of joked with you before we came on, didn't I? Is that it's either like 0 or 100 with these potential rumours, I feel.
Yeah, it's interesting. But I think as well, like, one thing it is important to preface before we do get into it, the kind of players that you are sort of either caught surprised by or may seem underwhelming are often the most important signings you can make to a squad, right? It is important to say that, like, these players could come in and these could genuinely be some of the best signings that we've made in recent years, especially as you mentioned there with Lanzini, mate. He's a free agent in the summer. So, to preface it with that, but also it just doesn't, maybe, as you say, because we've been linked to so many exciting names, I'm just not enthralled by it. And I've never really got Harvey Barnes, if I'm being completely honest. I think he's a player who is a fantastic finisher. I will give him that. I think he is he's got a very good, keen eye for goal. Other than that, I'm not really sure what he offers to a team. And I'm hoping you, all the people in the comments, can enlighten me, mate. Because I know obviously Leicester are sort of, it's going to the final day. Leicester have to win to stay up, right? And even if they do stay up, it seems inevitable that Harvey Barnes will leave Leicester, among a lot of other players, with reports saying that he would prefer a move to Villa, allegedly due to being able to stay in the same area and all this kind of stuff. I don't, like, where does he fit, but like, I think for me, it's the fact, you can have a player who can score all these goals and he does that so well. I mean, so far this season, he's scored 12 goals from an expected goals tally of 8.5. I don't mean to trigger any Villa fans with expected goals there. He's a very important player for Leicester, but I've just, like, remember in the Championship, mate, we had it every
Yeah,
season, didn't we? We had Leeds fans. It was like Pablo Hernandez is better than Jack Grealish. Yeah, right. Norwich fans initially, James Maddison is way better than Jack Grealish. Yeah, right. Like we had this every year, and then the
yeah,
year we came up, it was Harvey Barnes versus Jack Grealish. Guy can't even
yeah.
lace his shoelaces, in my opinion. Not to talk about Jack Grealish again on a Villa podcast because that's long gone. But I never got it, and maybe I'm talking through claret tinted spectacles here, and maybe that has sort of disillusioned my feelings towards Harvey Barnes, but it's not particularly exciting.
No, probably not. But I think you mentioned a really important word sort of back there is squad. And I think
Yeah,
that's what the deals are, is that if we are facing a Premier League season next year when we're playing Thursday, Sunday, we know that particularly in those wide areas that we are lacking in depth. And I think realistically, it's a bit of a coin toss really between. I think Leon's played better in recent weeks. Actually, I don't want to. I thought particularly in the Spurs game, I thought Leon was played a little better. Obviously, got a nice assist. But it's a bit of a coin toss. It's felt at times in the second half of this season, and I think having a player like Barnes, who you can bring in for your Premier League games against sides, maybe in the lower half of the division, and sort of rotate him in and out. Just 25 years old. I think the other sort of real thing is that I think this Villa squad lacks pace. I think that might be one of the biggest problems with the team, is that it doesn't really feel like anybody's got any legs. I think Leon sort of suffered in that regard after coming off the back of his injury. I think he's lost maybe a yard or two, and it feels like we've got a lot of good technical players, but in terms of going over the top and getting people in behind, that's where this Villa squad is maybe lacking a little bit. And I think he does bring that. And so, if you're looking at the fact that he's English, which does count for a lot when you're talking about these deals, 25, I think 12 goals that's a very respectable tally. Always performs well against the Villa. So you'd like to think that would carry on to a Villa shirt. It's not one like where I'm like, no, don't do it. But I think, in the right circumstances, if he's coming in to sort of bolster a squad and be a player who can help us, particularly through the tricky Christmas periods when the group stages are done, maybe in like not tempt fate, but in European competition. I get the value of it there.
He's a bit of a Rashford, isn't he? Scores in patches, injured semi-frequently, goes missing a little bit, comes back, always scores against the rival. He is a bit like Rashford in that sense. And yeah, I think the thing I've always said is like, to build a squad, you sign better players. And then like I was just thinking, well, you made a great point. He's a sort of a wide player. We have Leon Bailey, we have Bertrand Traore. Is he better than both of them? Probably. Like if we're being brutal, so yeah, maybe it does actually make a bit more sense. I think it would for me again. Like it would, some people are always like, "Why do you care about the fee?" Well, like, what? It's not your money, but like, well, we have to keep up with financial fair play. So, and we're just giving our opinions anyway. But you wouldn't want to pay him more than 20 million, really. FB refs on about £50,000 a week, especially if they go down. Exactly, mate. That's the thing, because I mean, there's when we went down, we didn't really have any assets you could pinch. So, and I know Leicester don't actually have. There's some money issues really with the ownership ever since the owner died and family inheritance and all that kind of stuff. I know there's been a lot of money issues around the club, and they've built the training ground and all that kind of stuff. Contract expires in 25, so about just over a year and a half left on that. I don't know. I wouldn't hate it, but I wouldn't love it. I think, as you say, Matt, we'd have to see. Obviously, depending on if we qualify for Europe, you need to sign these players. Nothing is, cemented yet. And obviously, Brighton play Man City tonight. And if they somehow manage to beat City, then they could technically get fifth with a win against us. So that's going to be hard as well. But we're going to preview that in a different video, guys. Don't you worry. But yeah, I think I'd have him for 20 million. I think the thing is, like, I look at a Lanzini as well, again, not a particularly exciting deal, is it, mate? I mean, he's free, so there's the bonus there, reportedly on around 70 to 80 grand a week. You've got the Argentinian connection, been playing in the Conference League, will play in the Conference League final this year, has been a part of that West Ham team for quite a while now, 30 years old. The numbers actually look really good for Lanzini, right? They actually do look really good. He's attempted 80.97 passes per 90, puts him in the top 1 percentile of all midfielders. He has an 89.3 pass completion rate. He's making 7.99 progressive passes per 90, 2.32 progressive passes per 90. This is all really good stuff. You know, managing 4 shot creating actions per 90. This is all really good stuff. This is Emi Buendia with 5 years more experience, though.
Yep.
And I think that's what it kind of comes down to, isn't it? So I wouldn't hate this one personally, mate. I don't know about you.
I think it's one where, and like, I can sort of relate this to the Harvey Barnes one as well, is that, you know, not only are we trying to build out a squad, but to talk about Barnes first, like, there's a genuine reality that, you know, we were talking about, is he better than Bailey or Traore? It's a good reality this summer that maybe both of them leave.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not like you not only got to add players on top of a Bailey and Traore, you potentially got to replace them as well. And I think when we're looking at the summer with, what's happening with Coutinho, you know, he's sort of these back-to-back injuries and stuff like that. And, like, you know, there's been talk of maybe a move out to the Middle East or somewhere like that. If someone like that is to leave, then you fill that place in the squad with someone like a Lanzini, very similar age, on a free transfer. I think those are perhaps the context that we've got to consider these deals in. And I think particularly with Lanzini, as you say, brings a bit more nous. I know that he had a really bad injury back in 2018, and that sort of curtailed his developments. And I'm not sure he's ever hit the heights of perhaps what people thought he would. Napoli are the other team that it seems that we're linked. I think these reports have come out of Italy. I think Napoli are the other one linked. And I was doing some digging through some West Ham forums and stuff like that, because I always think that that's a really good way to gauge sort of opinion on a player. And West Ham fans, rightly so, wouldn't be very happy if he went to Villa for nothing. It seems like I've not seen any loose rumours personally, but I'm not too in tune with West Ham's transfer rumours. That a move back to Argentina, back to River Plate, who I believe is who West Ham bought him from, has been the other heavily touted link as well. So we're sort of competed against, you know, obviously Napoli, everyone knows their story this season, but there's an emotional sort of return to Argentina in there as well. So I think Villa would perhaps be a left field option out of those 3 clubs. But, you know, as I said, I think when you consider it in the context of squad building, not only will we have that task, I think West Ham might have that on their hands too. You know, it feels like for a lot of the players in this West Ham team, they're coming to the end of their time there. You know, it looks like Declan Rice is going to leave this summer. You've got guys like Scamacca haven't worked out. You've got guys like Manuel Lanzini coming to the end of his deal. You've got guys like Ogbonna and people like that who are going to be on their way out. And so, yeah, I think, you know, it might end quite nicely with the Conference League, as you say, but it'd be interesting to see what happens there. Because I think he could be a useful piece, is the way I'd put it.
Yeah, I think a lot of teams are probably going to be looking at him. I think that Napoli are, that's an interesting sort of gauge, really, because you look at that team's about to get completely picked apart, and they're about to receive a good 300 million in transfer fees for like 2 players alone in Osimhen and Cravadonna. So, you know, that is quite interesting in itself, that Napoli see Lanzini as a potential replacement for Kvaratskhelia. Yeah, I think as well. I'd done some reading. I can't remember the article, but it was basically sort of explaining why clubs are rushing to sort of get the big signings done early, and that before, like, I think it's the 2nd or 3rd of June, because that's the sort of the bookend of the financial year for financial fair play. That's sort of 3-year period that they look at. So it's going to be interesting how quickly these deals are done, especially when you look at someone like Boubacar Kamara. We announced him a year ago yesterday, I think, when we played Manchester City.
Yeah.
We got
Very
that
good
one
point.
done very quickly. He's gonna have been on around 100 grand a week as well. So that's obviously something that they would have wanted sort of accounted for, so as there could be a fresher slate. So I'm interested to see how much business we do like immediately, because Lanzini, you probably want to get that done quickly just because you don't want him to get cold feet. You don't want other teams to come in, give options or whatever.
Yeah.
But in regards to sort of signing players for higher fees, or maybe if you're looking at Barnes for a 20 million, be interested to see how quickly those kind of deals get done this summer, mate.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And we're normally quite good at this. I mean, certainly last season we were very well prepared, weren't we? It's like
Yeah.
by the time that we went away on that pre-season tour, we already had a lot of the players already on board. Boober and guys like that. And so, yeah, I think it's one where like I think we can probably expect to see sort of the same thing. And as I say, like if we're preparing for the departure of a Coutinho, who I mean, he's almost become a bit part player in this squad in terms of, I'm sure we'd like to see him all play more than that, but the reality is in terms of his availability, he's not played much football. And so if that's the kind of role that you're looking to replace, and then someone goes to you, hey, how about free deal for Manuel Lanzini, couple of year contract or something like that, he'll come very happily. You sort of go, well, it's definitely something to consider. And by the reports, that's kind of the stage that we're at. So, yeah, I think for him and Barnes, it makes sense to sort of like explore these options. Particularly at Leicester, we've got a man on the inside at the King Power who can hopefully try and cut us a deal. Should Dino, unfortunately, it'd be interesting to see. Do you reckon, like just as a sort of tangent, reckon Dino they'd sack him if they went down, or do you reckon they'd stick with him? It'd be interesting to see what would happen.
Was it a short-term deal? I can't remember.
I can't remember. No, I can't remember either.
I'm not sure. Thing is, though, what worries me about Dino, right? What I have been worried about with Dino is I don't necessarily think he's considered the jobs he's taken too well after Villa. He jumped almost straight in at Norwich.
It is to the end of the season, the deal.
There we go. So I think if I'm being honest, I don't think he stays whatever the outcome is. If that's the case, I don't think if he keeps them up, he definitely isn't staying. And if they go down, I mean, I don't know who they'd get instead of, but I felt he jumped to Norwich too quickly. I don't think he had enough time to really consider what went wrong at Villa. And then obviously he's hounded out of Norwich by the fans despite having them, in and around the playoffs. And look at where they ended up. They ended up finishing 12th. And then he's taken this job. So he had Norwich in the Premier League and they stuck by him with in the Championship until they obviously got rid of him. And now he's taken another club that are relegation friend in the Premier League after he then fails to keep a club up and had us playing away where we were sort of sleepwalking towards relegation. If Leicester go down, Dean Smith's stock will be lower than it ever has been. And I don't know who would give him a job other than, sort of mid to bottom table Championship teams. And that, like, I don't, because why would you? He's got, there's a big caveat, he is not the reason why Norwich went down. Like, he jumped aboard a sinking ship and tried to keep it afloat, and it was just never going to happen. And it's the exact same thing with Leicester. It would be a miracle if Leicester stay up. It would be an absolute miracle because they have been tragic. Even under Dino, they've been absolutely tragic. And I just think I was thinking about this the other day, mate. You don't leave, managers very rarely ever leave Villa and go on to achieve greater things. You look at Paul Lambert, right? When we took Paul Lambert, he was a relatively, he wasn't the next best thing, but at Norwich he had Norwich playing a certain way, and was considered.
I think he'd done back-to-back promotions as well with Norwich, wasn't it? Like he'd done League One and Championship back-to-back.
I think so. Yeah, I think you're right. But like people weren't looking at him in the way that they look at an Eddie Howe or whatever who was on the come up. The point I'm trying to make, and he did a job at Villa. He did an okay job for a number of years, especially given the fact that his hands were tied behind his back in terms of money and recruitment and that kind of thing. And then he leaves. He goes. I mean, he goes to Ipswich, doesn't he? rivals of Norwich, all this kind of stuff. Goes poorly there. He's had a few bad spells, and now look, he's completely gone. Paul Lambert is not in the managerial game anymore, and I fear for Dino that it may end up that way as well. But I don't know. Like, it just doesn't seem. I think, if anything, it's kind of highlighted how much work Brentford, like how much of a good job Brentford actually do, really, because they've replaced 4 managers almost. Where you've gone, the gaffer's brilliant. They're not going to get better than this, and they've managed to level up each time, haven't they? So it's I don't know. I think Dino is on very thin ice. If he can keep Leicester up somehow, if Leicester stay up on the final day, maybe he'll get a decent Championship job. But I don't know, mate.
No, I completely echo your thoughts there. I do feel for him a little bit. I agree with what you said about jumping into the Norwich job, because I felt like his stock was okay when he left the Villa.
Yeah.
I know he got sacked. I know it wasn't great at the end, but I think people still knew what he'd done, the amazing job he'd done in getting us promoted. And I think he stepped into Norwich, and it felt like they were going down at the time, and it felt a bit bizarre. And then, I mean, I kind of get the choosing for the Leicester job, because it was like, if he goes in there and keeps them up, then it can put everything right. He can be the hero, he can put it back on track, and all of a sudden, especially with the experience that Craig Shakespeare and the like got at the club, I kind of get it. But yeah, if they do go down, mate, I had to echo everything you said there, unfortunately, which is a real shame.
It is, because I just want to see him succeed. I love the bloke to death. I absolutely love it. But every time I hear him talk in a presser, it's just a dead man walking, really. I think he knows it, which is sad. But it's the only reason I'd want Leicester to stay up as well, really. Like, if it's for him, really. I actually feel like they've had a really good sort of 5-6 years, really. FA Cup, Premier League, Community Shield, all that stuff. But I think they need humbling. I think Leicester fans need humbling. So they can hold that relegation hell. But guys, let us know what you think about Lanzini and Barnes. I know Twitter seems to love Harvey Barnes. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I just don't like Harvey Barnes. But let us know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Dan and I will be back for preview Brighton final game, big one. So make sure you stay tuned for that. That'll probably go up in the morning. This one will go up in the evening. And guys, as well, in the comments, just give Dan Wiseman specifically, don't just put Dan because of me. Give Dan Wiseman, just show him some respect, man, because he's been providing some quality content for you guys in my absence. So Dan, thank you very much.
Appreciate it. No, not a problem, mate.
Yeah. Like, comment, subscribe, and up the Villa.